So welcome to our annual Conservation Showcase, though our very first one as a virtual event. This event has been generously sponsored by our partners at the East Coast Credit Union. A big thank you to them for their continued support during these strange and uncertain times. I want to thank you all for joining us. We wish we could all be together this evening, but we're grateful to gather here on Zoom to share in this evening's conservation successes. And with that, I'd like to turn things over to our Executive Director, Bonnie Sutherland.
Hello, well, welcome to the Nova Scotia Nature Trust Virtual Conservation Showcase. And I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to be here tonight, and also to thank you for all that you do for the Nature Trust and for nature. As our volunteers and our donors and grantors, landowners, and our corporate supporters and our conservation partners. You all make a huge difference to what we do. So for those of you who are new to us, the Nature Trust is a charity dedicated to protecting Nova Scotia's natural legacy through private land conservation. Our mission is about saving wild spaces and species. We manage a growing network of over 120 conservation lands all across the province. And we give Nova Scotians the knowledge, tools, and opportunities they need to be an active part of protecting the places they love through our volunteer and our education programming. With so much of Nova Scotia in private ownership, many of our best remaining wild spaces are at risk. And we know that saving habitat is one of the most important ways to stem the alarming biodiversity crisis facing our planet. So the Nature Trust private land conservation work is more important and more timely than ever. What I love most about our mandate is that we're all about good news for nature, hope, celebration, and gratitude. We're about protecting those places we can all agree should be protected forever, as refuge for nature and for people too. And I love that we are achieving real results on the ground, tangible, measurable land conservation, and creating a truly lasting legacy of nature for generations to come. It has been a rough few months with the pandemic, isolation, and other challenges, but nature has been there for all of us, healing and restoring, and bringing joy and inspiring a sense of wonder. Like many of you, I've been rediscovering just how much I value nature. So it's especially heartwarming today to reflect on the gains we've made this past year in ensuring nature's future. Thanks to your kind support, we achieved another 1,100 acres of conservation wins this year. These successes build on the amazing achievements of our Lasting Landscapes campaign in 2018, all part of an historic land conservation effort by land trusts, governments, and Indigenous partners across the country to protect Canada's biodiversity. Our new conservation lands preserve diverse landscapes and critical habitat for species at risk and migratory birds. They buffer and provide connectivity between protected areas. They safeguard essential ecosystem benefits from flooding and erosion control to watershed health and integrity. And they preserve places for us to play and discover nature right here in our own backyard. I'll turn things over now to our Director of Conservation, Ross Firth, and his team to share some of this year's highlights.
Great. Thanks very much, Bonnie. Good evening, everyone. As Bonnie mentioned, I work as a Director of Conservation for the Nature Trust, and I have the pleasure of managing the conservation team, which is currently comprised of 7 staff, including myself. So the team includes David Hod, our Land Stewardship Manager, Joanna Skomorowski, our Land Stewardship Assistant, Ryan McLean, our Volunteer Coordinator, Rich LePay, our Conservation Biologist, Allison Thorne, and Jessica Bradford, who are Conservation Project Coordinators. The conservation team is responsible for all aspects of land securement and stewardship. Currently, the Nature Trust manages 125 properties comprising approximately 15,800 acres located throughout the province. Following the extensive work of identifying and prioritizing parcels of privately owned land of high conservation value, We work very closely with landowners, discussing a wide range of property-related matters and a review of the suite of land conservation options available for consideration. Most frequently, this includes donation, purchase, or conservation easement, but on occasion may also include a split receipt sale. Our success as an organization over the past 26 years has, in large part, been due to the continued leadership, professionalism, knowledge, and integrity of our staff. Over the past year, our conservation team has worked tirelessly to advance the work of the Nova Scotia Nature Trust. Success for us is measured not only in the number of properties secured or acres under our management, it's also measured in the partnerships and collaborations that we have with municipal, provincial, and federal governments, communities, academia, and individuals. Success can also be measured in the relationships that we establish with landowners that are built on trust, openness, and mutual respect. Integral to our success is the engagement and support of landowners. And I'd like to highlight the support we receive from Nova Scotia resident landowners, but also the strong support we receive from American landowners who recognize the importance of conserving habitats within this province. We're forever grateful to all landowners with whom we engage for their decision to work with us and for their commitment to conservation. I'd also like to mention the financial support we receive from donors, foundations, government, and other funding entities. In particular, I'd like to highlight the financial support that we've received over the past year from the Nova Scotia Crown Share Land Legacy Trust and the Canada Nature Fund through Environment and Climate Change Canada. The funding provided by these two partners has been critical in enabling us to secure properties and offset the costs associated with securement and stewardship. At each step of the securement and stewardship phases, conservation team staff are engaged in research, record keeping, field work, and dialogue. Whether it's Rich conducting a site visit followed by recommendations on the ecological values and attributes of a property, Allison and Jessica continuing with landowner engagement and conversations on conservation options, David working to improve our information management system for our stewardship program, Joanna visiting properties to complete baseline reports, or Ryan planning and delivering volunteer property guardian orientation training, we're committed to working to the highest standards and practices of the land trust community. Over the past year, we've been successful in securing 11 new properties representing over 1,100 acres of conservation lands in Nova Scotia. In some of our long-standing project focal areas, we're seeing tremendous success in adding new properties to existing land assemblages. And I'd like to highlight two such examples. In 2006, the Nature Trust launched the St. Mary's River Conservation Legacy Campaign. The campaign's goal is to protect the rare ecological gems of the river through land conservation and to create a ribbon of green, a corridor of intact riparian habitat along the river that will restore and protect the ecological health of this very special place. The river provides critical habitat for rare plants and some of Canada's most endangered wildlife species, including wood turtles. Wood turtles are listed as threatened under Canada's Species at Risk Act and vulnerable under Nova Scotia's Endangered Species Act. The river's diverse habitats are also home to endangered bird species, including Canada warbler, olive-sided flycatcher, rusty blackbird, and common nighthawk. With less than 0.1% of Nova Scotia's old-growth forests remaining intact, the towering hemlock-dominant old-growth forests that line the river are also some of the last in the province. Intact floodplain forests provide unique and irreplaceable wildlife habitats and many important ecological functions. Protecting the land adjacent to the river is also essential in restoring and conserving important habitat for aquatic species, including the treasured Atlantic salmon. The Nature Trust work complements conservation efforts within the watershed, including projects of local and regional conservation groups like the St. Mary's River Association, Nova Scotia Salmon Association, the Atlantic Salmon Federation, St. FX University, and provincial government departments. This past year, we added our 13th property to the St. Mary's River Land Assemblage, bringing the total number of acres protected to over 1,500. In the late 1990s, we began a dialogue with American landowners in the Mabou Highlands of Cape Breton. Together, we created a vision of keeping this spectacular landscape intact and available for people to enjoy in perpetuity through a complex multi-landowner conservation assemblage. This past year, we added 2 new properties totaling 230 acres to our existing land assemblage of over 2,000 acres. In late 2019, the province announced wilderness area designation for the adjacent Crown lands. Together, our combined conservation efforts have created a vast coastal wilderness of almost 6,000 acres. This is an incredibly beautiful landscape of sea cliffs and meadows, rich hardwood forests, beautiful highlands, steep-sided ravines, and a world-class hiking trail system. We are continuing to explore land securement options with landowners in this area to build on our already significant land assemblage, and I'm excited about the possibility of additional properties contributing to this protected area. In other parts of Cape Breton, we added properties to our North Mountain land assemblage, protecting mature forested landscapes and contributing to existing regional protected areas. And just north of Bedeque on the beautiful Bredor Lake, we secured 3 properties totaling over 300 acres. These peninsula properties are significant on a provincial level for their karst topography, stands of mature forest, and extensive shoreline. We also continue with efforts to secure property to conserve endangered species in southwest Nova Scotia. We purchased land on Gophilan Lake that adds to the existing land assemblage to protect Atlantic coastal plain flora, such as the endangered Plymouth gentian. On the Medway River, we added a 244-acre property to protect critical habitat for Blanding's turtle, listed as endangered under both federal and provincial species at risk legislation. Our focus on conserving coastal islands to protect breeding, overwintering, and migratory bird habitat continued with the securement of Pease's Island, part of the Tuscan Islands chain. Pease's provides important habitat for bird species such as roseate tern, bank swallow, and harlequin duck, and increases the network of protected islands in the region, including the Nature Trust's Seal Island. We're very much looking ahead to securing additional properties this year and identifying land securement opportunities beyond 2020. I'd now like to hand over the next part of the presentation to my colleague, David Hod, to speak about the many exciting advances to our stewardship program. Thank you.
Hi, thanks, Russ. Yeah, so I'm the Land Stewardship Manager with the Nature Trust. I'll talk to you about stewardship. Stewardship is really about how we keep our promises. It's everything we have to do after securing the property to ensure the things we promise to protect, that each land continues to thrive. Now, it may seem counterintuitive, but letting nature thrive is not as simple as just letting it go. The stewardship we do is a structured process to deal with all the things that might be needed so that we can say, yes, the natural features we promised to protect are still here and they are still thriving. I'm going to reveal something of the process as I share with you our successes over the last year. A major focus in the last year, and will be for some time yet, has been building our capability and capacity to deliver the right stewardship. 7 years ago, we had half the number and extent of properties to care for as we have now. As well as delivering on the promise to look after nature now, we are making sure we are well placed to do this with 2 or 3 times the properties that we currently have. We've been building our knowledge, our capacity, managing the flow of information better, and establishing the collaborative partnerships that are key to this. At the heart of growing our capability and our capacity are our volunteers. Last year, we welcomed 75 new volunteers and trained 54 property guardians, 3 times than in previous years. But perhaps more significant than the number of volunteers is how they are organised. They are working better together. Last year, we've been trialling volunteer hubs by setting them up in the 100 Wild Islands area and St Mary's River. These hubs are self-organising groups of volunteers coordinating much of the stewardship effort amongst themselves and having more fun in the process. The early signs of this are very promising. We'll continue to develop these in future years and introducing new hubs this year at Bridgewater and in the Valley. In the future, our property guardians are going to be more devolved, able to make the decisions they need to put things right, with staff operating much more as facilitators of good stewardship. Facilitating better volunteering is why we have a volunteer coordinator, Ryan McLean. As well as reaching out and supporting new volunteers and groups, Ryan's work also promotes better supervision of volunteer activity across the organisation. Good stewardship is impossible without good knowledge of the properties. That's best gained from time on site, which is really why our property guardians are so critical. But there is also a data and record keeping component. Last year, we secured a grant of $30,000 from RBC for a Tech for Nature, an exciting project that will transform the way we handle property information. During 2020, we will be trialling the use of portable tablets in the field making handheld GPS devices more readily available to our volunteers, and most significantly, although somewhat a bit behind the scenes, installing a database that will house all of our property records. So what has been the result of all this capacity building? Let's have a look. When we take on any new property, the very first thing we have to do is to really get to know it in detail. What species and habitats are there? Who are the neighbours? How do we get around the property? Does it have problems or liabilities we have to deal with? What are the things we really need to protect? We create a baseline report for each property to do this. Last year, we completed baseline reports for 40 properties. This is more than twice the number we have completed in any previous year. The number largely reflects the fantastic quantity of acquisitions we've made in the last few years, and is a natural task for a refreshed and enlarged team to undertake. Part of our success was the support we had in the field from volunteer naturalists who helped us gather the field information about our new properties in Mabu and at Seal and at Pieces Island. The next stage in looking after a property is to plan what it is you need to do. Every property needs a stewardship plan. At Seal Island, we worked with a local community that lives seasonally on the island to prepare the plan for seal. Previously, writing our plans have been largely internal affairs. We asked Seal Island residents just what it is that makes seal special and to identify what might threaten it. Through this plan, we now have a clear set of actions we need to undertake to ensure that wildlife at Seal is thriving. Our hope is that completing this work will allow birds like Leach's storm petrel and puffins to nest on the island once again. We also have a broad buy-in from those we need to work with to achieve it. The new format of our plan for Seal is just one model for our future property stewardship planning, though not all will need such a complex plan. Another model approach we are developing is writing one stewardship plan for a whole group of properties. We've been working on this for our 100 Wild Island properties, and we hope to learn from this pilot and use it on other parts of the province where we have assemblages of properties with similar conservation values, such as Mabu. The ideal with our properties is that no stewardship action is needed, only our vigilance. The reality is, for many properties, there is garbage to clear, invasive species to remove, boundaries to look after, and paths to maintain. Our stewardship plans set out how to deal with all of this. The work is by and large undertaken by our many property guardians. This is work that if we do it well, you shouldn't notice it, but you will notice it if it's not done or is done badly. Last year, we undertook several more organised stewardship work parties, bringing volunteers and partners together. For example, removing garbage at Barron Meadow and clearing windblown trees from the trails at Gaff Point. We know that many volunteers help clear trails, particularly after Hurricane Dorian. Well looked after trails are an important part of our work. Whilst access is not part of our charitable mandate, building awareness of land conservation is. Last year, we worked with trail management experts Cobequid Consulting to look at how we might manage or develop trails in the 100 Wild Islands area. This has given us a clear way forward to ensure the experiences of the natural environment we would like to offer work well for both the visitor and the nature we are here to protect. Regular monitoring of our properties is crucial. We have to understand what is changing on each of our properties and know whether those changes could jeopardise the things we are protecting. Some properties need a lot of scrutiny, others very little. We need to look over and report on all 125 properties at the very least annually. This is quite an undertaking, and for some of our most remote and low-risk properties, we have not managed quite to achieve that. But last year, we managed to visit 76% of our properties, and this is a great improvement on previous years, and is thanks to the, basically we did that thanks to the increased numbers and support from our property guardians. Our property guardians monitoring work is better too. We have simplified the reporting forms for most sites and are getting better and more focused information from the monitoring visits. Monitoring takes a more complex role on those properties where we have a conservation easement with the owner. These are legal agreements we have with the landowner to protect certain natural features in perpetuity, generally by refraining from certain activities. In the last year, Joanna and I have been building relationships with the owners of these properties. Good stewardship is always about collaboration, and nowhere more so than our easements. This relationship building has laid the foundation for better collaboration next year as we report back to them the results of monitoring each of these properties. The next stage in the stewardship cycle is to review and learn from what has taken place. Learning to do better is at the heart of good stewardship. What have we not managed to get right? How can we do this better? As I've mentioned earlier, a lot of our capability building work and the development of our volunteering programme has been based on looking at what we have done and learning. And this learning is not just internal, but shared. For example, we've been part of a community of practice with Better Organisations for Nature, sharing the successes and struggles of our volunteer development work. But we have also been understanding our properties better. For example, our bird's eye view volunteers have been out on a number of properties, filling gaps in our knowledge about the birds on our properties. We will never stop learning how to do stewardship better, as an increasing number of properties will have been looked after by us for more than 10 years. In future years, we'll be reviewing more of our stewardship plans and think about what we need to do differently to be sure that nature will continue to thrive on these properties. So that's stewardship. Now I'd like to invite Rich to tell you about our conservation planning work this year.
Thanks, David, and hello, everyone. This is Rich LePay speaking, conservation biologist with the Nature Trust. My work at the Nature Trust is focused primarily on conservation planning and securement, so aspects of our work leading up to the protection of a property. Although I also work with the stewardship team once a property is protected to help ensure its long-term ecological integrity is maintained. Conservation planning at the Nature Trust is an ongoing exercise. We are always interested in using new data and exploring new ideas and perspectives that inform our decisions about where in the province we focus our conservation efforts, and at a finer scale, how to prioritize amongst individual properties. This last year has been no exception, and we have undertaken a number of initiatives to improve our work, including a review of how we prioritize amongst properties within specific focal areas, the purpose being to identify the most ecologically important lands for conservation goals in that area, whether it be habitat for turtles, rare plants, or other sensitive species, intact floodplains, old forest, or other priority conservation targets, and to use that information to help inform landowner engagement efforts. We initiated development of a conservation plan. Although the Nature Trust has a long history of conservation planning, we are organizing and reviewing our approach to this within a common document to help direct our future efforts, and also to share with those interested parties outside of the organization. We have been leading a collaborative conservation planning initiative for coastal islands with participation from a large number of organizations, including multiple levels of government. The Canadian Wildlife Service, the Protected Areas Branch of Nova Scotia Environment, and the Wildlife Division of the Department of Lands and Forestry have been particularly involved and integral to the project. This initiative has several components, one of which is to organize information and ideas about coastal islands to help identify the most important islands to try and protect. We have also completed many desktop and field assessments to inform our knowledge of properties which have come to our attention as potential securement opportunities. These include those that are within established focal areas, such as the Mabou Highlands or along the St. Mary's River, as well as many properties that are outside our current focus areas, but are of potential interest to us. Central to a number of these initiatives is consideration of how to better integrate stewardship-related issues, such as climate change, problematic species, and practical challenges related to dealing with past land use practices into our land securement and prioritization process. With regards to moving forward and what's ahead in the year to come, we're looking to further advance a number of internal and collaborative initiatives, including completion of the conservation plan for the Nature Trust, which will outline the rationale for why we work where we do, and also outline a vision and goals for what we are trying to achieve within specific focus areas of the province. Undertaking ongoing property prioritization work, including furthering our collaborative planning with partners interested in the protection of coastal islands, identification of new focus areas, and consideration of how to better our property prioritization approach for all areas to reflect new scientific knowledge and insights. Additionally, we're looking forward to supporting Indigenous conservation initiatives and to further consider how we might better integrate a two-eyed seeing approach into our own work. Partnerships and relationships are an integral aspect of our work here at the Nature Trust, and I'd like to acknowledge several that have been particularly important to us from a conservation planning perspective. Deciding where we work and what properties to pursue is greatly informed by available spatial data on important ecological themes, including priority habitats and species. In order to inform our work, we depend on data that is obtained, organized, and made available by a large number of organizations, including the Mersey-Tobiatic Research Institute and the Atlantic Canada Conservation Data Center. The Mersey-Tobiatic Research Institute is very active in a range of ecological research and monitoring initiatives with a focus on Southwest Nova Scotia, and have been tremendous partners for us at the Nature Trust, providing invaluable information to guide our securement work for priority targets, such as rare Atlantic coastal plain flora and important Blanding's turtle habitat. Similarly, the experienced staff at the Atlantic Canada Conservation Data Center conduct ecological surveys throughout the province and elsewhere. And our work here at the Nature Trust is very much dependent on the data and insights they provide to us, as well as the efforts of the many other organizations and volunteers that contribute to this body of knowledge. Staff at the Nature Conservancy of Canada, other land trusts across the country and internationally, and multiple government departments continue to be invaluable partners to our conservation planning efforts, sharing data and information on conservation planning approaches and important insights and perspectives that help inform our work. In addition, we are very grateful for the collaboration and insights that members of the Kespowick Conservation Collaborative, the Confederacy of Mainland Mi'kmaq, academia, and other scientific and local experts have shown us. Our work would not be as informed or meaningful without this participation, and we look forward to further strengthening these relationships in the year ahead. And that's it from me. I'll now pass things over to Christina to share some updates about Nature's House.
Thank you so much, Rich. There have been some dramatic changes this past year in the landscaping around our office, which is also affectionately known as Nature's House. We have partnered with Helping Nature Heal, an ecological restoration firm, on the project, which has transformed our property from a typical urban yard with large paved surfaces, stormwater pouring onto the street, and water-hungry grass lawns into an oasis of native Nova Scotian biodiversity. This work showcases the types of simple, affordable changes that other urban landowners can implement on their own properties in order to increase native biodiversity, water conservation, and energy efficiency. Some of the changes include non-native water-hungry gardens replaced with low water use, low maintenance, native Nova Scotian vegetation, natural habitat created on the property to encourage birds, butterflies, pollinators, and other wildlife. Non-permeable paved surfaces were removed and replaced by low water use native gardens, permeable driveway, and wood chip paths. Drainage systems, natural landscaping, swales, rain gardens, and rain barrels were added to conserve water, reduce flooding, runoff, and moisture damage, and to manage all stormwater on site. The work has also created a wonderful space for Helping Nature Heal to share their extensive knowledge and techniques about the care and maintenance of native species. They conducted a pruning workshop on site in March, which was well attended by a group of enthusiastic gardeners. And in future, we will be planning additional offerings, although the formats may be virtual if they cannot be in person. We will provide updates when they are ready. And now I'll pass things over to Barbara, our philanthropy director.
Hi, everyone. So like this common tern, caring for its young, our donor support nourish and help the Nature Trust thrive. So If you've been thrilled tonight to hear about all these new conservation lands that are now protected and about all the work that's happening on the ground to care for and steward our marvelous Save Forever places in Nova Scotia, then please reach around and give yourself a pat on the back. Because it's only because of you and supporters like you who have so generously donated to the Nova Scotia Nature Trust that we have been able to save and protect these important habitats. We are so grateful to all of our donors, and I wish I had a photo of each and every one of you to share to celebrate the impact you have made. Just like the early bird always gets the worm, our monthly donors give us a gift of certainty. Thanks to them, we know that each month we're going to receive their gifts, usually in the form of donations rather than worms. Our monthly donors have inspired us over the past year. For instance, donors like Grace and Richard Beasley boosted our spirits when they decided to celebrate our 25th anniversary last year by doubling their monthly donations. And nature is thriving because monthly donors are signing up in record numbers. Last year, we actually saw a 25% increase in the number of our monthly donors. As well, the benefit to time spent in nature is resonating with corporations and organizations around Nova Scotia. And we're thankful for all the support we've received from businesses who championed our Connecting with Nature series of hikes and paddles and our annual dinner last year. People are investing in nature. People like Sue Sherwin and Richmond Campbell have joined our special donor group called Guardians of the Land. They are a group of people who are deeply committed to saving our natural legacy and who have signed up to give a significant annual gift over a period of time. Thanks to these donor guardians like Judy Robinson and her daughters, we know what donations we will be receiving for the next few years and can therefore plan ahead. All our lives were disrupted significantly when the pandemic hit. While the recent challenges and subsequent lockdown have made it difficult or impossible for some of our faithful donors to continue to support as they have in the past, we have been truly touched and uplifted by all of the people who've actually stepped forward to provide additional support. Partly this seems to be due to the caring nature of our supporters. When confronted with adversity, they looked around to see what they could do to help. As well, it seems as if the lockdown has made many people appreciate how important nature is in their lives. Nature is not just a nice to have, but is in fact critical, and they are celebrating this with action. Some, like Jen and Jeremy here, are donating the money they would have spent on gas. For others, like Patrick, it's just the right thing to do. And then there are all the donors from afar who love and miss Nova Scotia, and even though they don't live here anymore, they're stepping up to save and protect nature in this province. One thing the pandemic has given us is time to reflect. What kind of world do I want to leave for the generations to come? What kind of legacy will I leave? This kind of contemplation has led many to consider creating a truly lasting natural legacy by leaving a gift to the Nature Trust in their wills. These are just a few comments shared by our generous donors, and we'd love to hear from you. Why do you love nature and feel it's important to support the Nature Trust? Please take a moment to reach out to me and tell me your story. But the vast majority of our donors are not featured here with photos and quotes. They're quietly supporting in the background. So we'd like to send a huge thank you out to all of you. You are our heroes. Your generosity is helping the Nature Trust bloom. Thank you. And now I'd like to hand things back to Bonnie.
All right, we hope that hearing some of these highlights of our recent conservation successes tonight has left you inspired and hopeful and proud, because you made these achievements possible, and we sincerely thank you. Know that together we are making a difference for the planet, for nature, and for generations to come. Looking ahead, the urgency to protect habitat and to reverse biodiversity loss continues to escalate. We really are in a race against time. But on the bright side, we also have an amazing window of opportunity for action right now. We have bold global and national commitments to protect 30% of our landscape by 2030. We have historic investment in land conservation in Canada for another 3 years. We have innovative, exciting new conservation collaborations in place. And now, as a result of the pandemic, we actually have a renewed appreciation for nature out there in our communities. So driven by both the urgency of this situation and this incredible window of opportunity, our path is clear. Emboldened by your enthusiastic support, the Nature Trust has once again charted a course that is wildly ambitious. We have committed to doubling our protected areas by 2023. That means more land saved in 4 years than we've been able to save in our first quarter century. And why? Because nature matters, and because nature needs us now more than ever. To achieve these wild ambitions, we need to raise $4 million from our friends and supporters. We then need to leverage over $15 million in matching funds. And we'll need to bring all the landowners on board needed to protect 14,000 acres of our best conservation lands. So we look to you, our generous supporters and the champions in the community, to help us bring this bold plan to fruition. We look forward with hope and optimism to a nature-filled, exciting, and inspiring year ahead. And that concludes our showcase presentation. I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to join us this evening, and thank again the East Coast Credit Union for sponsoring our virtual conservation showcase. And for anyone who's interested in staying online for another few minutes, we'll open the event to questions. Ryan has been monitoring any messages or chat. You can use the chat feature down the bottom of the page there, and Ryan will bring forward any key questions to the relevant staff member, and we'll be happy to answer your questions or respond to any comments that you might have about our conservation achievements and our plans for the year ahead. So I'll turn it over to you, Ryan.
Great, thanks, Bonnie. So we must have done a great job in presenting all of our information clearly, because we don't seem to have any questions. I will give you another minute or two if anyone does have anything that they would like to ask. Please feel free to either type it into the chat or use the Q&A. We'd be happy to answer, and we'll stay on here for another couple minutes. I'm seeing some wonderful comments that people are really grateful for the presentation and feeling very inspired. We do have a question from Greg Lukeman. So he's asking about the Property Guardian Hub group for the St. Mary's River. So that would be my department. So yes, indeed, we've got things underway, and we'll be trying to get that group together again to talk about the new land in the area and to discuss some of the future work that needs to be done in the area. And just to kind of give everyone a chance to learn a bit more about the properties that we do protect, because we do protect over 21 kilometers of the St. Mary's River shoreline. We have a couple of other questions. So one coming in from longtime friends, Bob and Wendy McDonald, who are asking, where are the focused areas over the next 2 years? So I'm going to turn that one over to Ross. If he can unmute for a moment.
Great. Thanks very much, Ryan, and thanks for your question, Bob and Wendy. Our focus areas, the primary focus areas will remain broadly the same. So areas such as Mabou Highlands, St. Mary's River, our coastal islands, Southwest Nova and our endangered species program, urban wildlands, Wentworth Valley area, Brador area as well. We're going to continue to build on the land assemblages that we've started and have been, in many instances quite successful with. We're not clear, at this point whether we're going to be adding or looking at additional focal areas, but we're certainly committed to continuing to work and continuing success on those existing focus areas.
Great, thank you, Ross. We do have another question as well, coming in from an anonymous attendee, and it says 30% by 2030. Is this all types of protected lands? So I'm not 100% clear on the question. I believe I will open that one up. Bonnie, do you have anything to add to that? I think it's basically we're looking to double our conservation. Oh, sorry, you're talking about the federal government ones. So 30% of lands by 2030, is that all types of protected lands? Bonnie, can you speak to that?
Yeah, so I mean, the federal government hasn't totally clarified, but certainly with the commitment to protect 17% by this year, 2020, there is a mixture of lands in there. So there are lands that we would consider truly protected to high IUCN standards in terms of wilderness areas. For Nova Scotia, that would be our wilderness areas, nature reserves, and land trust properties. But I believe in most countries globally and nationally, it will be that mix of those types of protected areas and what they call other environmentally managed and conserved areas, which may include indigenous protected areas, large landscapes that are protected from major industrial uses, but may not actually be under permanent kind of conservation, like a conservation easement or owned by a conservation entity. So there is maybe from the perspective of a lot of our supporters that there may be considered compromise in some of that percentage, but certainly there's a real push from the biodiversity community that as much as possible, that 30% needs to be lands that are permanently and effectively protected for their biodiversity values. And certainly the Nature Trust target of doubling our protected areas by 2023 is 100% strongly protected, biodiversity first focused protected areas.
Great. So we don't seem to have any other questions coming in. So with that, we will conclude this year's showcase. I want to thank you all again for joining us, and I look forward to the days when we can all be together again to celebrate in person. So good night and stay safe out there.